I really understand the impulse to say, I want to get to C2. It's like a badge of honor, isn't it? The sort of thing that people feel like they want to do, often through societal pressure. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Story Learning Podcast. I hope you've been having a great week. I've got so much news to share here at Story Learning that I don't even know where to start. So how about I start with the things that I can tell you, because there's one thing I can't tell you, so I can't even go there. But let me tell you the things that I can tell you. So first of all, I've started learning a new language, which is 7 words that I haven't said for quite a long time in that particular combination. What's different about this, and actually quite exciting for me, is that it's the first time for quite some time that I have started to learn a new language without feeling the need to talk about it, without having any particular goal, anywhere I want to get to. It's for the pure pleasure of it. It's one of those cases, I don't know if you ever find this, but the idea of this language has been building up behind the scenes, and it's finally got to this tipping point where my curiosity has got the better of me. I'm like, right, I'm going to do this. So I emailed my publisher and I said, look, please can you send me a copy of your beginner's book on this particular language? And she said yes, and 2 days later it arrived on my doorstep, so thank you very much, Emma. We don't offer this language at StoryLearning, although maybe we will end up doing so once I've finished with it. So looking forward to talking about that on a future episode. For now, I kind of want to just keep it to myself, keep it as my own project, because as soon as I know what's going to happen, as soon as I start talking about it, it kind of takes on this life of its own, and then there are expectations and all of this stuff, and yeah, that's the right season for me. So I will take my time before talking about that. The second thing is we've been working really hard behind the scenes on an exciting new series of books. Have I talked about this before? I can't quite remember. It is very closely related to our books of short stories, but it's a different concept. And it's going to be helping you focus on the spoken language rather than simply reading stories. It's really exciting. We've got quite a big team working on this. And I was just reading through one of the early drafts as it's going to be presented in the book the other night. I was just sitting up in bed and reading it out. I was just thinking it's so cool to be doing something new like this. It's 10 years since I wrote my first book of short stories in Spanish. 2018 was when they were officially formally published with Teach Yourself. So it's been 7 years since these gorgeous books that you can see on the shelf behind me if you're watching the video version of this, which you can, by the way, on YouTube and Spotify. It's been over 7 years since these were published. So to have a new series on the way is just incredibly exciting, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. So more details about that in due course as well. So today's question comes from Sahil Pandita ZJ6DF on YouTube. And Sahil asks, can we achieve C2 level in any language if we learn as an adult from 0? And how many hours will it take in terms of instruction and study and practice hours? Right, so can you learn to become C2 level as an adult from scratch? But the answer is yes, you can, absolutely. The question is whether it's worth it or not. And even whether it's practically possible or likely for you to be able to, depending on your circumstances. So let me come out and say from the start, I don't aim for C2 in any of the languages that I've learned. I don't believe I am at C2 in any of the languages that I've learned. I don't think I ever have been. I'm also very skeptical of people who say that they have. I think for the most part, they're not. I remember people talking about passing their C2 level fluency exams. They get certified C2 level fluency, but then when you actually listen to them speak, it's so far off C2 that it's just not even funny. I think it's one of those things where you can take exams for this stuff in theory, but the thing about C2 is it's like the highest level of practical real-world proficiency across the board. And the only way you can get there is, well, we'll talk about that in just a bit. So I don't aim for C2 level. I don't think it's worth it for the most part, but it is possible, and you can study your way there. It's just a hell of a lot of work. Now, I remember my friend Anthony once said, he was describing the progression through the levels. And for those who don't know, CEFR is the Common European Framework of Reference. This is the grading system we use in Europe for language difficulty. So when we say C2, we're actually counting up from A. So we're going A1, or A0 you could say is a complete beginner. A1 and A2 are the beginner levels. B1 and B2 are the intermediate levels. And then C1 and then C2 levels are the advanced levels. So C2, if you have reached a C2 level, you passed a C2 level, or whatever you want to call it. You are, you have mastered the language. And it's equivalent to, for those of you who are familiar with the IELTS exam, which is an English language exam for people who want to emigrate to other countries, go to universities and things like that. It's equivalent to an 8.5 or a 9 on IELTS. And for anyone who knows IELTS, you'll know that's incredibly difficult. So what it means literally, if we were going to quantify if we were going to quantify C2 and say, what does it actually mean? It means the following. It means you can understand with ease virtually everything heard or read. Virtually everything. That means in any scenario that you're in, you're going to understand or be able to read with ease. So nothing's going to trip you up. And when you imagine all the different situations you could be in a country where the language is natively spoken natively, to be able to understand virtually everything with ease, without even trying, I mean, that's a very high bar. Next, you can summarize information from different spoken and written sources, reconstructing arguments and accounts in a coherent presentation. So this is the ability to manipulate ideas and language, or to manipulate language and ideas. I'm probably not C2, if we're being honest, but it's the ability to actually understand complex things and actually reformulate them, restructure them. You can manipulate it just like a native speaker could. But that's interesting when we say the word native speaker, because, let's come back to that in a second, because the last thing here, and I think it's related, is can express themselves spontaneously, very fluently and precisely, differentiating finer shades of meaning even in more complex situations. Now, there's a lot in this, right? Express yourself spontaneously, very fluently and precisely, finer shades of meaning even in more complex situations. So, look, I remember when I was first training to be an IELTS examiner, this is the English exam, and we were looking at the higher grades of IELTS, even before this kind of C2 level, even C1, C2, the instructor would ask, do you think that every English native speaker is a C1 or C2 level, one of these IELTS 7.5, 8, 9 levels? And then they would actually play us examples of native speakers who were not particularly educated, were not particularly well spoken. And they would ask us, like, is this person able to summarize information, reconstruct arguments in a coherent presentation, very fluently and precisely, differentiating finer shades of meaning? And you're like, no, not at all. So it's a funny one, because when you start to get to these higher levels, not every native speaker of the language can actually do that. They can be a native speaker, but they can be making mistakes, they can be incoherent, they can be, I mean, you know what I'm talking about here, right? It's like, it's not everyone can do this. So the point I'm making here is that it's a very, very high level. And going back to my friend Anthony Moore, he said, when you're working your way up through these levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, every level, every band, takes twice as long as the last one did. Okay, so let's just work through this for a second, because it's interesting. So let's say that the A1 level took you 3 months of daily study in a language. Okay, that means that A2 would take you 6 months, B1 would take you 12 months, B2 would take you 24 months, that's 2 years. I hope my math, never do public maths is a good policy. C1 would take you 4 years, and C2 would take you 8 years. And I think that this, for the most part, is right. We wish it wasn't, but the truth of the matter is that if you wanted to go from day one in a language to C2, it is going to take you well over 10 years, probably more like 15 or 20 years until you are really, really there. Like, that's how difficult it is. And if we think about what kind of situations you're likely to come across foreigners speaking at a C2 level, I mean, there's actually quite a lot. So, I live in the UK, and whenever I go to London, for example, and I use London as an example simply because that's the place where I tend to interact with the most foreigners. Whenever I'm in London, I'm always interacting with people, with people from different countries who have learnt English as a second language, who are essentially native speaker level. All right, they're a C2, and these would be people like, they could be doctors. So you could go into the NHS and meet a consultant who is from somewhere who learns English as a second language. They could be people working professionally in companies. The kind of person we're talking about is someone who maybe came to the UK when they were 18 to go to university. They spent 3 or 4 years in university, so they're 22. And then they stayed in the UK, they got married to an English person, they work in an English company, and now they're like 42, so it's 20 years later, and now their English is absolutely spot on. That's the kind of situation we're talking about. It's very common. This is the weird thing. It's really common because you see this happening all the time. There are plenty of people that meet this criteria, and if you just think around the people that you meet around the place that you live, wherever it is, I am sure that you can think of examples of foreigners who have learned your language as a second language and who speak it impeccably, possibly even better than you. And I know also plenty of people, academics for example, who have a wider vocabulary than I do in English, simply because they spend all their time dealing with academia and with words in a way that I don't. I mean, I spend my time communicating on the internet, where I actually have to deliberately dumb down my language level quite a bit. Not to you, of course, because you're my favorite people, but you know what I mean, right? To communicate, we communicate best with simple language. But academics just live in this world all the time. You know, I remember just a couple of days ago, I was watching a philosophy debate. Hours of fun, I tell you. And it was with a couple of people who were non-native English speakers. They had very thick accents, but their English was absolutely astounding. I mean, I could barely keep up with them. You know, that's the kind of situation that you're going to find someone at C2. So the question is, can you study your way there? And I would say, yes, you can, but not through study alone. You would have to live your way there, basically. Because the thing about C2 is, the higher up you get in the levels of a language, the rarer the language becomes. So if you want to take, like, for example, complex grammatical constructions, very rare vocabulary in specific domains of expertise, you may only come across these expressions or vocabulary items once a year or once every 2 years or whatever, because they're that rare. And that makes it incredibly difficult to actually study your way through in a normal way, listening to podcasts, reading books, that kind of thing, because it's just not, you can learn them and you can try to memorize them, but then you'll forget them because you just won't hear them again until 2035 or something. And so you've really got to obviously start with studying to learn the language, but then actually make your life in the language, which can include anything from moving to the country, having a partner who speaks that language natively and is not interested in learning yours, which is often the problem. You have a job where all of your colleagues speak that language, and eventually, through spending all day, every day of your life and career surrounded by the language, you will pick it up eventually, but it's going to take real time. And so then the question is, what are the benefits of doing this? I really understand the impulse to say, I want to get to C2, but it's like a badge of honor, isn't it? It's like owning your own home or becoming a millionaire or whatever it is, visiting every country in the world. The sort of thing that people feel like they want to do, often through kind of societal pressure or Instagram or whatever. But if you think about the actual benefits of C2, you know, I'm really not convinced that there are many. Assuming if you are not making your life in that language. If you're married to someone who speaks another language, or if you live in that country, then I absolutely I commend the desire and the impulse to learn that language to a really, really high level. But absent that, I'm just not sure it makes much sense, because in your day-to-day life, you don't need C2 level at all, because at a B2 level, which according to our calculations from earlier is a full, 12 years? No. Yeah, 12, which saves you an entire 12 years. If you're happy with B2 over C2, it saves you a full 12 years of study, there or thereabouts. And you can already live your life perfectly well in that language. You know, to take my London example, when I think back to people that I meet who are from other countries in London, the majority of them are going to be speaking like somewhere a B1 or a B2 level. And I have plenty of friends who speak at that level. And it's fine, it's totally fine. Like, I don't need them to be any higher level than that. It just doesn't matter for almost anything that you're going to do in your life. So, you know, it really is one of those things where it's just generally good not to be attached to that achievement. Because think about language learning at a certain point becomes a game of diminishing returns, because it takes so long and it's so hard. You've just got to ask yourself the question, what else could I be doing with my life at this point? In those 12 years it's going to take you to get to C2. You could learn 5 other languages. You could start a business. You could go and travel the world. A lot of stuff to do in life. And I think if it's really worth you putting in that extra work to get to C2, you're already going to know it. You're already going to have that strong reason. And if you don't, may I humbly suggest that you just don't worry about it and focus instead on enjoying your life with that language at the center and not feeling the pressure to reach that level just because it exists. I mean, the moon exists, right? People have gone to the moon, but we're all relatively happy like not going to the moon. Is that a good analogy? I don't know. Anyway, if you have language goals like this, it is a really good idea to plan for reaching them. Let's say you did want to get to C2, or let's say you want to get to A2. It doesn't really matter. If you have a goal, then it is really important that you set a target and a plan for actually getting there. If you set a plan, you are far more likely to actually reach the goal. And so if you would like to do this and set your own target and plan for reaching your language goals, you might like to download my language goal planner. And the link is in the description. It's completely free. And what this allows you to do is to self-assess your level across all language skills. And it guides you through the process of setting your own personal language goals and then tracking your progress, which is going to help you actually stick to those goals. If you download that, fill it in, take a little bit of time to really get clear on what your goals are, you're going to be far more likely to actually reach them. And that would be a great gift from me to you. Link in the description. If you're on YouTube, there might even be a QR code on the screen. I don't know. Either way, go and grab that for free if you would like it. And it's perfectly possible you might disagree with me about this whole C2 thing. If you do, let me know in the comments. Let me have it. I want to hear exactly what you think. And if you are C2, if you're convinced that you are C2 in another language, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to read from you what you had to do to get there and what it means to you. That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and I'll see you back in the next episode.